Good evening and welcome to the February 24th, 2014 regular meeting of the Edina School Board. We do have a quorum this evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We had a special meeting on January 27th, a regular meeting on that same day, a special meeting on February 8th, and a special meeting on February 10th. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Moved and second. Any additions or corrections to those minutes as written? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving those minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Rick, could you please walk us through this evening's agenda?
Sure. I will first of all highlight just some of the meetings the board did have in February earlier this month. The board did meet with the Edina, Minnesota, or Education Minnesota Edina Governing Board for a good strategic meeting, a lot of discussion around how we can grow our partnership, and appreciated the dialogue. There was follow-up that did occur from that, and then further plans of how we can grow that partnership will continue to evolve in the weeks and months ahead. School board met in retreat on February 8th, a Saturday morning, a lot around leadership training. Dr. Jim Rickabaugh from Wisconsin was our facilitator for that training. Board did a lot of planning and then guided the administration on some next steps. On February 10th, then the board did hold another work session where we talked a little bit about leadership plans for the upcoming calendar year. Also talked some preliminary discussions as related to the 2014-15 general fund budget, and finally discussed the architectural RFP, our plans for an architect who could possibly be leading us into our next phase around a potential building project. This evening, earlier in the evening at 5 o'clock, the board again met in a work session to further review our 2014-15 budget. The administration provided an update on that report, or on that budget and the planning that's going on. There is a task force that's working on that. We have someplace between $750,000 and $500,000 of adjustments that need to be made on our $100 million budget. The administration will continue to work on that. We'll be working with the Finance and Facility Committee and bringing a formal plan forward at the March school board meeting. The board also then received an update on some of our strategic work as related to both the birth through grade 5 study and the 6 through 12 study. And that concludes the work that the board has done since the last regular meeting in January.
Thank you, Rick. We do have one correction to this evening's meeting. We're going to add an item C2 related to the mechanical at Highlands Elementary, mechanical improvements, and that's to accept the withdrawal of several bids that were submitted incorrectly. Get a motion to insert?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Margot, did I use the correct terminology there? Do we have to specifically list which ones they are?
I can list them for you if you would.
Is that needed for the motion, I guess, is the question.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So we would accept the withdrawal of McFarland, Ebert, and Meisinger
Okay.
of their bids.
Thank you.
And we would have that motion prior to the Highland mechanical approval.
Okay. So we will make that C1, and we will make the approval of the mechanical C2. Sorry for that confusion.
Also in the consent agenda in the field trips, we are adding one additional field trip for the DECA group going to Georgia in April. That was already added to the budget, or added to the agenda, and the board already has that included in their agenda, so it's not really a walk-in, but just an informational update since it was first released in a Thursday afternoon in the consent agenda.
Thanks, Rick. So all those in favor of approving the addition of the Highland Mechanical's bid withdrawals as item C1, making the Highland Mechanical approval C2, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting agenda has been amended. We do have a member of the audience who asked to come speak tonight. We would ask Lionel Dorville to come up and share a few words. Thanks, Lionel.
Good evening, board, and thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I come here today to talk about school expectation, because currently I feel that there's a disconnect with my expectation as a parent and the school expectation and the communication or the information that's put out there. So currently, and the disconnect may be that I'm a guardian, not necessarily a parent, for a young man currently at the high school that has faced some challenges. And thus far, I haven't received not one phone call. And if anything, I think with my school board run and added push around this topic, I would have hoped that I would have made myself a target that I would be contacted if there was any challenges that I, as a parent, can help the school facilitate, which I have not been contacted to date. So currently, I'll receive a phone call if he's late, if he missed a class, but there's no phone call if his grades may not meet my expectations or the school expectations of being proficient for college preparation, which for me is problematic. Currently, the transparency around what is needed to address some of these challenges, and in thinking of the school-based criteria, I'm trying to figure out as a parent, is it the working memory that he struggles with? Is it the process speed that he's struggling with? Is it the nonverbal intelligence, or is it the verbal intelligence? And that's the full IQ measure that currently schools utilize to assess and measure some of their work. And counselors, I know we're limited in our resources, but I'm surprised at this point that I haven't received a phone call, an email, or any contact from the school counselor to come in and plan a strategy to assure that we are meeting expectations and I, as a parent, can fulfill my duty to assist my child in the school in any way, shape, or form. And lastly, I think those counseling hours are very limited. You have a short 20-minute window where you come in and this is supposed to be an assessment or a disclosure of information where I get an insight into what my child has been going through throughout the school year, which I think is limited and not consistent with our mission to help all kids and our all for all vision and mission. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from anyone in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Lionel. We will follow up with you after the meeting. Thank you for your time. Next up, we have our recognitions. Rick?
Great. We have two of our staff members who are joining the ranks of the National Board Certified, Clarice Hansen and Geneva Fitzsimmons. They'd come forward, please. We can recognize them for their extra efforts and the work that they do. Clarice, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So talk a little bit about what was all involved in this effort to get to that next level of performance and why you were interested in pursuing it.
Okay. In order to do national board, you have to complete a test in which it is in your area of expertise, which is Spanish for me, high school Spanish. And it was a pretty intense exam. You had to do listening, reading, writing, all different things, speaking, a lot of different pedagogical things, as well as write 4 different essay papers, and 2 of them were about your videotaped classroom work, and then one of them was about following 2 different students along a curricular unit and talking about the pedagogy behind that, and then another one was actually your documented accomplishments, so different things that you've been involved in and how that has progressed you. So it was pretty intense.
So talk about, if you look back at the training, what's one of the biggest difference makers as you look back from that experience that you feel like you've gained in becoming nationally board certified?
I think that I just do everything now with more intent behind it. I think it's very easy to come, have several years out of school and then get into your routine and sort of just do the same things you're used to doing in the classroom because they have worked in the past and become a little mundane at times. And so I think this was a great process for me because it really made me reflect on why I do things and what was the purpose behind that, and also talk to different colleagues about things and really think about different ways that I could implement new technology and different strategies.
Great. I'll ask Chair Meyer to come forward and recognize you.
Thank you very much.
Smile at the camera. Clarice, congratulations.
Thank you, and my newborn cooperated,
Yeah, that's
so
right.
thank you.
Geneva, you too joined the ranks and nationally board certified. Busy things always going on in your world, and what again challenged you to take this on and talk a little bit about what you see as some of the highlights from your experience?
I was looking for something. I had my master's for quite a long time, and I was looking for something that I could do in my classroom, and this really fit the bill. Again, we had the 4 portfolio entries that you did in your class, and I thought that was really valuable, learning along with my students and being able to reflect on what my practice is and really improving that. The content area, that test was hard. Wow, 6 areas, and it was timed, 30-minute sessions, and it was a lot, but it really stretched me professionally, and I feel re-energized, and like she said, like I'm doing things with more of a purpose now.
And of course, you were the bonus winner because you were also named the 2013 Minnesota Music Educator of the Year by your colleagues, and that's a very prestigious award. And talk a little bit about your passion for music and a little bit about the organization that you're involved in that recognized you for this work.
This award was given by the Minnesota Music Educators Association, which is the umbrella organization for Minnesota band, choir, orchestra, classroom music, collegiate, pre-K. And every year they award up to 4 awards, and another middle school director in 196 also received the award. So I'm very honored and humbled, because when I found out I got it, I was a little hesitant because there are so many wonderful people out there that could get the award. So I was humbled but excited. And what was the rest of your question?
Passion of music. What brought that? You know, where did you get the music turn on, and how do you bring that alive for your kids?
Music came naturally to me growing up. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I am the youngest of 13. And everybody played an instrument. And I was going to concerts from when I was little. So I've always known this is what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be, and I love playing with kids every day. So that is my passion.
Well, again, congratulations to you on the national board and also being recognized by your peer at the state level. Great accomplishment.
Congratulations, both of you.
I almost forgot Ryan Gallagher. My goodness. Ryan Gallagher, right up front here. My gosh, how embarrassing. Here you drive all the way here. Ryan, congratulations, recognized by the Edina magazine as a top teacher in our district. It's kind of a great recognition because you're representing a lot of teachers, but let's talk a little bit about your work as far as what brought you into education and your work that you do each and every day for our young people in Edina.
Well, first of all, I really am humbled by the award, but I'll take it. I really appreciate it. But just like any educator, it's really about the results of the students that excite me the most, and that's why I'm in this profession. And I'm really proud of the business department we have here. We have 2 teachers, and Alicia Savino is the other one, and we work really hard with our students. We prep them for business plans, ad campaigns, like job interviews, and all those skills like that. So it's been a really exciting year for you. I don't know if I dodged your question.
No, you did. You did a great job. But you talk a little bit about DECA and the work, because you're, the point person on that work, and it's up to over 100 students. A lot of excitement around that. Talk a little bit about, first of all, maybe what it stands for, but then also some of the work that that organization does for our young people.
Well, simply put, DECA is a high school marketing organization, and the exciting thing for me is, like, last year we had students here that won nationals, and that was the first, as a breakthrough for our program. So our students are really excited about that. Like the program, like I said earlier, we spend time learning the content, but we also expand, and the kids do advertising campaigns and job interviews and business plans. They write them, they do the creative visuals, and then they present them in front of professional judges. So it's really fun practicing with them and working with the students throughout the year on it.
Ryan, again, on behalf of the community, congratulations to you. There you go. Congratulations. Congratulations to all 3 of you.
Next up, we have our early childhood presentation. Are you
We
gonna
actually
step
have
in?
an absentee on early childhood, so we're going to postpone that. Lori Den, who is presenting tonight, is not able to attend, and so we will have them come another night for the board, and we'll move right into our other reports if that's okay.
Great.
Ask Margot Bach to join me as we plan for our general fund budget. Again, as the board's aware, and the community probably as well, we have several different budgets that we work from, but the one that drives our machine the strongest is the general fund budget, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, as well as the board will be acting later tonight on the capital fund budget. I'm going to kind of drive the ship, and Margot and I will jointly share this, the information in the slides.
Briefly, where we get our source of money, the majority comes from the state, just under 70%, and the next area is about 29% local property taxes. We are very dependent on the state, and when we get 1.5% or increases from the state, that is just a certain portion of the pie. We also provide a service to students, so as you would expect, service takes people to provide, and so our major expense is salaries and benefits for the staff that provide that service. Another way of looking at our expenditures is by program area, and we do focus, as well we should, our expenditures on direct instruction or instructional support to students. Just under 80% of our budget is either direct or instructional support type services. Historically, we have had budget adjustment periods, and this breaks it out by dollars in the various areas such as administration, direct instruction, instruction support. We also have broken that out by percentage. Again, we do try to keep any adjustments away from the classroom. The more consecutive years you have of adjustments, the more difficult that gets to do, but you can see how that has broken out in the last 7 years. We've already gone through the long-range financial planning parameters for the base financial plan. We do have increase from the state for 14-15 projected. Beyond that, for the base plan, we're planning on 0%. We have expenditure assumptions, the addition of all-day, everyday kindergarten, and then we're using this as the kickoff or the framework for our budget discussions, and we have been using that since December. We are taking a multi-year approach, and a year ago we looked at this same graph and looked at 13-14 and 14-15 and changed the trajectory of where our fund balance would go and that revenue and expenditure gap, and that's what we're looking at again this year for January, and making adjustments so that as we look out to 15-16, making some adjustments in 14-15 will help that multi-year picture. So we are well on our way in this process. We have had multiple updates for you as a board at work sessions, also Finance and Facilities Committee. We've had 3 or 4 budget task force meetings. We've met with the full administrative principal teams multiple times and gotten feedback on the last 6 or 8 weeks, and we are meeting again tomorrow morning, and we'll prepare final information to go to Finance and Facilities Committee next week. And ultimately to first reading at the board in March with final approval in April.
So as we were preparing for the budget, and again, what we've talked about at the board work sessions as well as at the committee level, we recognize that we have some adjustments to make, reductions, new revenues, maybe realign some of the funds we currently have, but we're someplace in that $500,000 to $750,000 range on a $100 million budget. So someplace between 0.5% to 0.75% adjustment that we need to make. We also recognize there's probably some items administratively, given our strategic plan, that we want to bring back as enhancements or things that will align us better to some of our strategic priorities. That could be one-time funding or ongoing funding, but in the end of the day, we recognize that we need to make sure the revenues and the expenditures get to that balanced line. As we looked at the budget adjustments, we used a lot of information that was previously provided to us from other studies that had done in previous years, as well as got input from the administration at the site levels, as well as the district office, identifying a variety of different tiers of reductions. That first tier would have the least impact to the classroom. That tier 4, actually not tier 2, that bottom number has the greatest impact. We recognize that probably we're looking at both tiers 1 and 2 as we go forward with our planning. Tier 1, again, will be some new revenues that we're able to generate and some other adjustments. Tier 2, we could have some impact on staffing as we look at that. But some of this is dependent, again, on what we do on the enhancements. And so administratively, we've identified some areas that we want to grow or improve our priorities with, as far as be it from staffing or programming. We've set our priorities as the highest priority being tier 1, the second to being tier 2, and the third being that third tier of $200,000. Again, this task force is making the study. We provided a brief overview to the board earlier this evening, but we'll come back with a formal presentation at the March 17th meeting. Also, this is going to the committee level early in March. The recommendation at this time, just in general numbers, is that we will probably use all of the Tier 1 opportunities that we have before us, as well as some significant Tier 2 adjustments, which would bring us to just about $1 million. And then with that in mind, we could possibly bring in some new enhancements, either through one-time funding or ongoing. The board did provide us some additional direction at the work session tonight, but it's early in the game, as they say, and so we'll come back formally for a discussion item in March 17th, and then the board will take formal action at its April meeting. We've also got a capital budget that we'll be acting on tonight, and Margot did review this to the full board at the January meeting, but again, thought we would just touch on this before the board takes action later tonight, so I'll ask Margot just to walk through this if she could.
We have completed our capital request project. As I explained earlier in my presentation in January, the requests were different this year because of education and when we will be out in buildings doing mechanical repairs and that kind of thing. Some of the requests were less, knowing that a particular building or area might be on the list 2 or 3 years from now. The remaining dollars we typically spend in the key area for buses, building improvement and repairs, emergency types of things. We also spend for textbooks and for site allocations. And also because of the kindergarten additions, we will, the portion in review and comment that the department said we can't take out a lease levy are the desks and chairs, the furnitures, fixture, and equipment. That'll come out of capital. And then some dollars for strategic initiatives as we move forward with our studies. So you see a side-by-side comparison from 13-14 to 14-15. The major change there is the Concord and Cornelia furniture and fixtures addition that are required to come out of capital. As far as building projects and capital approval of that, of the $400,000 right now, we are there are a few projects that have been approved. All are under $50,000. They're very small, again, because the major areas are being addressed by the Alternative Facilities Plan, our 10-year plan. We also are setting aside equipment dollars and prioritizing where there is a high need for replacement of our buildings and grounds equipment. It's very, very old. Our staff has done a fabulous job of keeping equipment well beyond their useful life. And so we're prioritizing and developing a replacement plan for that. So the funds in buildings and grounds will be used for a combination of emergency fixes within the buildings and also equipment replacement.
Covers it?
Yep, that covers it.
So again, the board will be acting later tonight on that item. And if there are any questions as it relates to the budget, we'll take them at this time.
to us briefly some of the process that you have gone through in looking at the budgets in terms of getting input and ideas around how to make these adjustments?
We took multiple steps. One is to look back at previous Berg processes. As you saw in the presentation tonight, there was 4 tiers, and we're really focusing on 2 tiers. We've gone back to previous Bergs and saying what were in those lower tiers, or 3rd and 4th or 5th, depending on the year, that we did not address or make adjustments to. We also looked at comparative data in other districts and where are we spending more per student than in other districts. Maybe we're making a conscious choice. That is something we have wanted to do, but just having that conversation. And also done multiple levels of brainstorming at a staff level in terms of what I would say even at our principal and administrative meetings, where what I would call a cross-functional team, where we're in groups together and brainstorming about, have you ever thought of this at the elementary or the district office, that kind of thing. Did I miss anything?
Margot, your last slide showed capital building projects based on request of $400,000, and an earlier slide had said we had $3 million of requests for $2 million worth of capital projects. So is this saying we're only using at this point 400 of that 2 million, or is that 2 million what goes for all of the capital projects we're approving?
2 million goes for all the capital projects, to include buses and
Buses and
textbooks.
everything else.
And,
Okay.
and so the process requires
Okay.
everybody to request that. A component of that then is the buildings and grounds piece.
Okay.
And historically, we've been more specific on what we're recommending at this time so we can get out for bids. But again, because what we will approve is much lower in dollar amount and the bigger items are in the 10-year plan, we're just allocating those dollars to buildings and
Okay.
grounds.
Yeah,
so.
I was just confused the way
Yep.
that was called out in that one slide. So
Sorry.
thank you for clearing that
Yep.
up.
Additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. About every other month, I decided that I'd just give a quick update to the board and the community about just a variety of leadership topics that are occurring in the district that may spur some additional comments or thoughts. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the sidelines here to also add some comments, but we do have a lot going on in the district. Again, we're very focused on our strategic work of this learning being the constant, and as we start moving this strategic initiative forward over the next months, we'll continue to see how we're going to use time and talent and funds and space in new ways to make sure that our students are really ready for the world that lays before them. It is about that excellence that we continue to value, and so we'll continue to be in that same place of that strong academic base, a lot of opportunities and options available for our students. What we're really doing is that continuous improvement of where we need to advance our excellence. And so as we look at both at the secondary level and our birth through grade 5, that's the work that we'll be working on, driven by our mission. So this is some of the excellence that we recognize at the secondary level does not have the birth through grade 5. These are some of the things that as we do our study, we know that it's important that we continue to maintain this value of personal relationships, the high quality staff, that we look at high expectations in the areas of arts, academics, and extracurricular, that we continue to provide choice and options for our young people, that they have opportunities to learn, to lead and serve, and that they truly are ready for that post-secondary world or that career success that they strive for and that families strive for when they have their children attending Edina Public Schools, and that we continue to have a commitment to continuous improvement through best practices. As we know that we don't tend to get out front of things, but what we watch is what is the best research that is working, and then we make sure we implement those best practices in a very successful manner. As we look at our programming, there are really 3 areas of study. The birth through grade 5, we're in the phase of doing some discovery work on that as we shape some general recommendations. The grades 6 through 12 study, we'll have some more defined recommendations as we start moving that forward, and we'll actually be piloting some of the programming next fall. And then next year in 2014-15, we'll be doing a community education service plan, so that we'll have all of our programming that we provide this community under one umbrella, Next Generation. The work that's been going on in our Next Generation work has been, again, in information. We're now into this input and recommendation development, and then we'll start formally acting on those recommendations in May and June. In the birth through grade 5 area, I might call on Randy Smazel or Gwen Jackson just to give a brief update to the board and the community about some of the work going on with the birth through grade 5 study.
So our Birth to Grade 5 committee has been looking at feedback that we received from staff through a survey, feedback from the community, and feedback from our students in grades 3, 4, and 5. And we have been looking at the data from those surveys and looking for themes from the surveys that will then translate into options that we'll be able to take back to staff, to students, and to the community to get feedback. In addition to surveying our staff, community, and students, we've also been visiting other schools and looking at unique programming that they have to offer. We've also been examining the research in education in the early years up through elementary school, and have looking at innovative articles. So the inputs that are going to impact the different kinds of options that are being produced come not only from the survey but from research and from these innovative schools. So we are right now at the point where we are trying to bring all of that information together and generate some of those options that we can then take back out and gather some feedback around.
The grade 6 through 12 study, again, had a series of 15 different areas of action. I'm actually helping facilitate that. We have an implementation team of 6 teachers and 3 principals who are driving these recommendations around how we make sure our young people are ready for the global world they're going to live in. So we're taking a strong look at what that means around world languages and the competency levels around that. We're taking a look at personal development and leadership skills and how we continue to say what are the competencies we're looking at versus a degree, but what really do we want our students to be competent in, and what do we want them to master so that they leave Edina Public Schools that we know they'll be successful. We're taking a look at the personal learning and advising, saying what are some pathways that might not be that typical one that's right now available but would be helpful for that student going forward. So we're looking at different ways of delivering instruction, different ways of giving students opportunities to experience their learning. We've got this unbelievable staff that we know will help support them on that. And what they're also doing is looking at new ways of advising and supporting our young people in their learning and their families. Because as we get into more choice and more options, as we get into looking at how we want to make sure our students understand their strengths and how they learn best and what their possibilities are, we recognize it may take some more support to do that. So looking at a network of support that can help advise them beyond that counselor. And so we'll be piloting some of those programs. The fourth area that we're looking at is the focus on students and staff collaboration, that power of team. We're seeing the benefits already in some of the piloting work we're doing. Earlier this school year, we heard about the high school's Wednesday collaborative time, where the students are really working together during a pause in the day to help each other with their learning. But we're also doing more around staff collaboration at all the schools. And then finally, how we use our time and our space, our grade level configurations, our schedules, our school year. How do we make sure that that really helps align to the success of personalized learning experience for all of our secondary students? So we'll have some general recommendations coming forward around advising, around the world language competencies. These recommendations will be coming forward in April. The e-learning square plan, we've actually been, I think we're in our second year of that model. I'm going to ask Steve Butner just to give an update of where we are with this. This is that bring your own device. But Steve, if you maybe take a step back and then take a look at some of the next steps that might be evolving through the task force work that your team's been on.
Certainly, thank you. As a district, we are looking at e-learning square as actually, I like to think of it as more of a stool that has 3 primary legs on it. One of them is the device, the other one is the professional development, and then the digital instructional content. Last year we did pilot it at the 9th grade, and then this year we again did e-learning squared at 6th and 9th grade. We are reviewing the success of that project and looking at what's working and what's not working. We've surveyed our students, our staff, and our families. We're collecting that information, and we're tabulating that right now. And then we're also working closely with the teaching and learning department, the leadership at those schools, to figure out what's the natural evolution of those programs. And we hope to have recommendations soon for our evolution of that project.
Thank you, Steve. And then you can see the other areas that we'll probably be bringing recommendations, where we'll start piloting around alternative instructional models, starting to think and go study deeper into schedules, looking at grade level configurations, what's the best way to deliver instructions to the success of our students. So looking at that at the secondary level, and then looking at some alternative and new ways to use our school facilities to enhance learning within the schools. Where we are in this whole process is it is a design flow process, so that the first two stages around discovery and interpretation, that's really where our birth through grade 5 study is at this point. I would say our secondary study is in that experimentation study phase, where they're starting to finalize recommendations. We'll be doing some pilot and prototype work, so that by the spring of this year, they'll be soon moving into the evolutionary stage, where we start taking the learnings that we've had and start exploring that on a piloted basis, on a phased-in basis. Some other leadership updates. We continue to have negotiations going on with our local teachers union. There continues to be very collaborative spirit about it, and ongoing discussions. We remain very hopeful and appreciate the problem solving that's going on by both the district leadership team as well as the union leadership team that's moving forward on that, but we're hopeful that soon we'll be able to bring that to a resolution point. We did have a tentative agreement earlier this year, but need to move forward on that. From a leadership standpoint, later to date, the board will be approving the change in status of Jason Doctor. Jason currently is the assistant principal at Southview Middle School, and his first love remains in the classroom, and so Jason has requested that he's been a very successful experience as an assistant principal at Southview, but has decided that he'd like to return to the classroom, so we're going to honor that request. We'll have an opening at that level. We continue to take a look at different ways of making sure we are having learning going on, even if the weather doesn't cooperate in Minnesota. And as I said, we are not going to let any weather beat us. So we're getting creative on how we're going to address both the extreme heats, whether it's hot or cold, or whether the snow comes, of what's the best way we can continue to provide services. So we're looking at a variety of fronts. We've received quite a bit of input from parents, staff along the way, but we'll have a formal plan that we'll be presenting to the board in April and May. It might be May before it's all finalized, just again on better ways we can make sure the learning continues if Minnesota's going to have this kind of winter. Again, this is not something that's been typical to us, but we're going to respond accordingly. There was also press earlier this month as related to food service and serving of meals. If students didn't have lunch money available, while the district has some protocols that we continue to, that would limit that is not occurring. We continue to work very closely with families if the family does not have, or the student is short money as it relates to receiving a meal. We work very closely with the family on a personal relationship around that. We have not denied any family this school year that as far as getting a meal, because we know that nutrition and learning, they do go hand in hand. We'll continue to take a look at that protocol, so as we roll that out in 14-15, there'll probably be some clarification around that as well. Another area that we're studying as a school district administration are the student fees. These are the fees charged to students that are part of just the regular ongoing school year. And so we're assessing, again, what we need to do to make sure that we are aware of those fees, if those fees are appropriate, making sure there's a check and balance system in place around that, and those recommendations will be going through the policy process. Earlier again this month, I think it was last week, Minnesota Department of Education released a new report around graduation rates. I'm going to ask Chad Schmidt to make a few comments related to this new report.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So in 2012, the state, I think I'm on, the state of Minnesota altered the graduation rate calculation method that they were using. Prior to this, districts and states around the country were using their own, basically, way to calculate graduation rates. So now there's a universal way that has really come from the feds to the states. And it is a 4-year cohort model. So what we do is we track all students starting in 9th grade who should then graduate in 4 years, students who come to us in 10th grade who should graduate in 3 years, come to us in 11th grade who should graduate in 2 years, come to us in 12th grade who should graduate in 1 year. And this is then an accumulation of that. So the 4-year graduation rate that you see on there is reflected back on our class of 2013 that graduated in June. And 92% of students met that 4-year graduation rate. And then we look back at another year of time. So the 5-year graduation rate for the class of 2012. So that's students who graduated in 4 years, plus students who took a little extra time to finish. That rate is 97%. And you see a similarity for the 6-year graduation rate too. The trends in our 4-year rates, low 90s basically. So the last 5 years, 90%, 90%, 93%, 94% last year, and then 92% this year. We are continuing to dig into that data, so disaggregating it by student groups to see how different groups of students are graduating, as well as some of what we need to do is track individual students. So there are some students for whom we don't know necessarily what happened when they left us at grade 10. They did not register in another Minnesota school, and so their status is at an unknown. So some of the work on our side is about trying to track each one of the, so now it's about going backwards a little bit to track each student, but more importantly, it's about going forward, making sure we track each student when they leave our system, where are they going next, and having some idea about what's next in their education.
So your last comment would lead me to believe that someone who started here in 9th grade and maybe left in 11th grade, they're still counted in our graduation rates in the year they would have graduated if they had stayed here?
As long as they did not go to school in another Minnesota school and have a record on file. So a student who left our school system in, let's say, spring of junior year, as you said, Cathy, and we thought they would come back for the senior year. We didn't know any different, but they didn't come back for their senior year, and they didn't register in another Minnesota school. So their record is basically an open case of not knowing where they went next.
But if the family moved to Colorado or Florida and they finished off their career, their high school career there, then our records would look like that child didn't graduate from high school?
Unless we find out that information. That's partially correct. So we could code them as moving out of state. But if we only knew that they were there here in spring and we thought they were going to come back in fall and they didn't come back in the fall, then it's sort of left as an open case. So that's part of what I think our improvement is around tracking students when they exit our system. So that's a step for us to take internally.
But kids who bounce around from high school to high school but within the state of Minnesota, they're counted as graduated from the last place that they are on a Minnesota school record?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Complicated.
So those folks are not in the denominator for our statistic?
So the last students that she just described, yes, you're correct. They are not counted in our count.
Okay. So if we had a lot of kids leave because they weren't doing well in the system, that would still make our numbers look good potentially.
If they registered in another Minnesota school and were there as of the last record, then yes, they would not be counted against our graduation rates.
Okay. Is there any way to figure out or look at why people are leaving and whether it's a positive or a negative reflection on the school?
So again, I think that's part of our tracking as students are leaving, getting some clarity about not only where are they going next, but why are they moving out of the system.
Historically, the burden's been on the school that they go to request the records and keep us posted. This now is putting a little more burden on this current school to try to track that student. And again, if they just leave and we don't know, it's a challenge. So we're just, again, schools throughout Minnesota are kind of wrestling with that same issue right now.
Thank you.
Just in regard to tracking our students, do we track or gather any data on resident 273 students that potentially leave the system at some point or choose not to go to our schools? Do we do any analysis on why?
So not universally, Sarah, but I think, so if we talk to the school principal or maybe a school counselor, they would probably have a fairly good idea of most students why they're no longer attending one of our schools.
Okay.
That's where the personal relationship was with the student and with the family. But as a system, that data is not necessarily collected in a way that we could disaggregate and analyze.
Okay.
Thank you, Chad.
Yep, thank you.
Questions about strategic plan or some of the leadership work going on that haven't been covered yet. Finally, I'd just like to recognize Cheryl Erickson. Cheryl was a longtime teacher in the Edina Public Schools and died earlier this month after a very challenging battle with cancer. Cheryl was a physics teacher at Southview Middle School. She was known as mom to students, to staff. And that's the type of passionate teacher she was. She would do whatever it took for someone to be successful, and it was her colleague or whether it was a family or a student, she was going to be there for them. And she battled very hard with this cancer and lived the fullest life she could. She had moved from physics to looking at working with more of our students at risk because she had such a deep passion to make sure all kids could be successful. Last Saturday, her church community recognized her, and it was just a wonderful memorial service about her life, and it was so powerful because there were so many students that came back, and they had a time of open sharing, and the stories those students told about the impact Mom or Cheryl had on them was it was really something. And so we lost a great colleague in Cheryl, but the good news, as always, is that she shared much of her life and her skills with us, so we know that that spirit that Cheryl had for young people and learning is being carried on. She'll be missed. We send our condolences to her family, and again, recognize Cheryl Erickson, born in 1959, died in 2014.
Thank you, Rick. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to bring the consent agenda to the floor. Rick, could you please walk us through?
I will. There are our regular personnel recommendations, both for our K through 12 program as well as our community education services. We do have a variety of recommendations because this is the time when we are requesting leave actions by our staff as they look at the 2014-15 year. We have our expenditures payable for February, and then the amended school board meeting date that we now have set for April. Our commendations, and then again the generosity of our community with a variety of gifts. And then finally is that field trip that the DECA team, Ryan's team, is going to Georgia in April. And that would conclude the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Dr. Dressen. Any discussion regarding the consent agenda, or any item anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda prior to its approval? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our action agenda, we heard about it earlier this evening in a presentation, the capital budget project request. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the capital project request for 2014-2015. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the capital project request for 2014-2015, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the Creek Valley mechanical improvements. Can I get a motion, please?
Moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Creek Valley Elementary School mechanical improvements. This went out for bid. A little additional background, please, Margot.
Yes, we had a very competitive bid process for Creek Valley and for Highlands also. We had 7 bidders for Creek Valley, and would recommend the successful bidder of QE Contractors for Creek Valley Elementary School. As you will, I'll just add this for both the agenda items coming up. Both are above the construction budget. We have talked about that at Finance and Facilities. Last year we were very fortunate in our mechanical bids for Concord that we came in under budget when the market around us was coming in about higher. was somewhat of an anomaly, and the market is very tight out there. Districts are doing projects like we are, and also adding facilities for all-day, everyday kindergarten, that kind of thing, so the market is very, very tight. So we are seeing that on this side. We did discuss it at length at Finance and Facilities Committee. The priority for our 10-year facility plan is to replace the mechanical systems. That all the 18 months worth of work or 24 months worth of work and prioritization, that is the priority. We are already seeing benefits of the results at Concord for having an updated HVAC mechanical system in terms of a quality of learning environment, in terms of air quality. And so the recommendation is that we move forward with these. What we will do and are doing is evaluating other projects that are within the $10 million plan for the two years. And specifically one area, some of them will be smaller, and we'll continue to see how the other smaller bids come in, and we're hopeful that maybe we can gain some dollars in some other areas as we work through the buildings. One area we will put on hold at this point in time will be the Valley View parking lot for a combination of reasons. One, it's a sizable project, and the other is that because of some of the study work that we're doing in terms of where might facilities go for middle schools and high schools, and with the secondary study and the facilities planning, it may make more sense to hold, and we talked about this at Finance and Facilities, hold on that until we know what if anything, we're going to be doing at the site. So that will be one option that we're looking at, and the administration will continue to look as quotes come in, report to Finance and Facilities, and make sure that we stay within budget. We do have a little room potentially in this fall's levy, but not a lot of room. So we're going to use a combination approach, and that's very descriptive, but it's for both agenda items, and I figured the question might come up because they both are over the initial budget.
And are the overruns in what we've budgeted and what they're coming in, is it holding a similar percentage for other school districts in sort of the western suburbs?
Yes, it is. And actually, what we did for Highlands, because that was the first one that we actually received bids on, and the range that we received from vendors at the time that day, and then we had 3 vendors withdraw their bids for errors in their bids. We thought we better wait and see how Creek Valley bids come in to see if that was just kind of an anomaly for Highlands or if that's the trend for our district. And in the meantime, other bids have come in other districts, and so it's where this market is right now.
Thank you.
Any familiarity with this contractor or references?
Yes, there was familiarity with our architects, and I also believe Eric has worked with them too.
Okay. There's no questions or comments regarding the Creek Valley Elementary School mechanical improvements, which came in at $4.7 million. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have 2 motions regarding the Highlands Mechanical. The first one is the Highlands Mechanical bid withdrawals. Can I get a motion to bring that to the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Just touch on this for a second, Margot, please.
As I stated earlier, we had 3 bidders, which is unusual in a bid process, that submitted bids and then afterwards found errors in their bid and requested withdrawal. And so you see those attached in your materials. One is McFarland Construction Company, Ebert Construction Company, and Meisinger Construction Company. And the recommendation is to approve their withdrawals. The error was sizable, and I think we would put the district at risk holding them to meeting that bid. And we do want to have a good performance and good project done. And so would recommend approval of their
Do we think this is anything other than just a totally weird coincidence that we have 3 bidders on one project who all, after the bids are open, say, oh, by the way, we made a huge bidding mistake?
So one was an individual type error. The other two had a same contractor, because they have subcontractors, and the subcontractor had given two of the vendors in incorrect numbers. So two of them, they were using the same resource and information. So that's why two of them had it.
Does this reflect the volume of projects happening around the metro area or the state, or is it just simply a coincidence?
I haven't seen three in one bit. I think it's just a coincidence that day. We also had somebody walk in at like 10 seconds after 2 o'clock that day, and they'd been it was just a very unusual day. Might have been a full moon. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Margot. So the motion on the floor is to accept the removal of the bid withdrawals. Can I get a motion to approve? I'm sorry, can I get a vote? All those in favor of approving the bid withdrawals, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have the Highlands Mechanical approval. The bid came in at 4.4 million. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the Highland Elementary improvements. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have purchase of data and internet lines and service. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Steve Butner, any thoughts to share?
Yes, thank you. The internet is becoming quite a critical resource that we use on a daily basis. What we're doing is ensuring that we have two lines of connection to the internet. So one is through ties, which we have in a contract right now. This is a secondary line that we'll be using not only to provide redundancy, but also drive traffic along that secondary line as well. Our hope is that relieves some of the pressure on our main pipe, and also then provides a backup in case we have internet outage. Prime example is last week during certain times of the day, our internet connection was going up to 600 to 900 megabits. And so we are consuming quite a bit of internet right now, which is good. But we just want to make sure that it's always available, especially as we move more and more towards an anytime, anywhere learning environment.
So do we have two different connections now, or is this a new thing that we're adding?
We have two existing connections now, and so this is one that we'll put into place more as a redundant one as opposed to concurrent ones.
So what I guess what I'm saying is, are we replacing a provider that we already have, or is this like adding it something new?
No, this is utilizing our existing line. I'm sorry. So we'll have two lines. We have two lines, and we'll continue to have two lines. What this allows us to do is file for E-rate for both of our lines and get reimbursement for both of our lines.
And are we going with the same person who gives us the second line now, or is the person that we're taking, is that new? Is it going to be a new provider? That's
a great question. We are going with the existing one, and what we're doing is, so we'll continue with ties. We have been using OET, and we'll continue using OET. They have a fiber connection to our buildings, and so that reduces the costs associated with the connection. So we pay for our internet service, or the amount of bandwidth, then also being connected to the internet. And OET and ties both provide us fiber connections to the internet. We'll continue to use both of those companies.
Thank you.
So if one of the issues is that the line goes down, if we're using the same provider, do we run the risk that that second line goes down?
No, we have two specific pieces of fiber, one coming from ties and one coming from the Office of Enterprise Technology. So if one of our connections got cut, then the traffic gets routed over the other line. So having two lines allows us to have a failover.
Will this increase our capacity for data at the buildings?
That's correct.
Was there a need to increase capacity? Because I thought within the past year we had approved additional funding to already increase capacity.
Not only does it provide redundancy, but it also increases capacity.
But the
and
goal
so
is redundancy.
it provides both.
The primary goal was redundancy.
That's correct.
Am I reading this right, that Comcast, but for the transition, would have been cheaper?
Their price quote came in cheaper than OET, but they did not provide information of what would be that connectivity cost. And so their proposal was that we would use cable connections in order to do that. That generally is not as reliable. That's something we're not familiar with. And then there'd be associated costs for the hardware to connect that on it. And so, yeah, their price for the internet service was cheaper for the amount of internet traffic, but they were very vague and they didn't include the total costs of what it would be to connect the pipes, if you will.
Additional questions or comments? And the cost of $37,800 is for a 12-month period?
That is correct.
Okay. Additional discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of data and internet lines and service, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have Student Policy 502. Need a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
So moved and seconded. We've seen this before. There haven't been any significant changes, I understand, since we last saw it. Anybody want to walk us through or review?
Just a quick review. The policy was brought before the board at our meeting on January 27th with the primary change of guidelines being removed from the body of the policy and placed in an appendix. At that meeting, there was a recommendation that there be reference to the appendix within the body of the policy, so that reference has been added in paragraph 4C.
Thank you, Regina. Any discussion?
By referencing it in the policy, does that mean it has to go to the board before the appendix can be?
No. The intent was to provide a look here, a guideline, or I guess a roadmap. So if someone wants to find that appendix to know, well, I don't see any of these guidelines in the policy, it's just acknowledging the fact that there is an appendix. So they would know to look there.
I thought last time there was some concern that given the importance of doing searches, that perhaps that should be in the body of the policy itself rather than just a reference to it.
Can certainly take a look at it at the policy committee meeting.
We can look at it.
Yeah,
That was a question that was raised.
it was.
Thank
And I will say that the event, we did have an event where we piloted that, and it was random testing, every so many students. It was very successful. We did not have any students who had any issues at the dance, and so we thank the students and the staff and our liaisons officer for successfully implementing it. But
I heard from my son that some people requested to be tested.
there it
for
is.
the experience.
That's right.
And which test are you referring to?
Breathalyzer, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. That way they should be able to figure that out. It's the breathalyzer test that we're, again, making sure our dances and the school, after that evening event would be successful for our young people.
Additional discussion? So what I'm hearing is we're going to approve it now, but we're also going to send it back to policy and ask that
Correct.
question again.
And I have that note.
Okay? David, that makes sense?
Sure.
All those in favor of approving Student Policy 502 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That's it for action items this evening. Discussion, we have Policy 533. Who from policy would like to walk us through?
Okay. I won't go through all the detail, but a general overview of the placement of 533 up for board review. There's a wellness committee that has been reviewing wellness for the district. The scope of this policy is specifically looking at food and nutrition and physical activity. The wellness recommendations that have been discussed with teaching and learning have a broader scope. So this policy is focusing primarily on nutrition and activity. There is language that we can see here that suggests a lot of rewording as well as an amended appendix. So the policy committee has already had quite a bit of discussion about what's here. We look forward to adding any other recommendations from this group that we can take back before it comes back to the full board for approval.
And the fact that it is limited to food, nutrition, and physical activity for this particular policy is a lot of the wording in this policy is required by federal law to receive the various grants and to comply with the various food programs for our school lunch program. So we're complying with federal law. So that's why it's more limited than a whole student wellness policy.
Okay, I guess my question was around the appendix, which from what I understand is new, Appendix 1.
It's revised. I mean, there has been an appendix in the past,
But
and
of
then
it-
these
okay,
guidelines
of it
are
similar, but okay.
adjusted.
And I was just, I know at the top it says that we will adhere to the following standards, and I wanted to verify if those standards were, as Cathy just said, federal mandates, or if some of these are things that we're trying to achieve. You know, when we're talking about, you know, trying to find fresh and locally sustainable foods, you know, I'm not sure that's always possible. So what,
But that's what the language says, will be offered when possible. So realizing that
okay.
that's an aspiration, not necessarily will always be able to be accomplished.
And in this case, by intention, not putting in a recommended percentage or minimum quantity.
And then, and just for example, in our own policy committee, we had a discussion about 2D, about the kinds of milk that you can offer, and we wondered about that and questioned that, and it is specific to the federal regulations, and
It
that's
is
the
now.
milk
Yeah.
we
Okay.
have to supply, and we're not allowed to supply any other, so.
Okay. Great.
Maybe it's a silly question, but how is this policed, or who's the,
No, that's
who
a
are
good
the
question.
food police? Who is the food police over there?
That would be under transportation, buildings and grounds, food service, and finance. And teaching and
Margo's phone is
learning.
gonna light up.
Contact
We do
Thanks,
have a
Mark.
student wellness committee that has administrative representation, student representation, and parent representation. Randy and myself co-chair that, and we have done quite a bit of work with the committee. We also have looked at other districts, specifically spent some time in Minneapolis and what their policies are like, trying to, obviously, nutrition for our students and activity for our students is important. We value that. Trying to balance and find what's right for Edina in terms of having that criteria. We also feel at this timing, we've been working on it for a good year and a half. Timing is right to update the policy because we also, it provides us direction and to move forward as a committee with other things. And it's also useful information, as every 3 years we're required to go out for bid for our food service management contract, so then we have this information of what the district expectations are, or the vision is. And like some of the wording suggests, we will try for some things. There are some things that are absolutes. Obviously, the federal requirements are absolutes. You see two appendix. The first one is new. The committee is used to seeing a more detailed appendix, which is reflective in Appendix 2. I would envision, I think we envision that at some point that may phase itself out. But at this point in the transition, we wanted to provide more a broader Appendix 1 with more specificity in Appendix 2. Randy?
In Appendix 2, there's still a breakdown of calories. Is that still the current guidelines, or have those shifted in the, because I know there was the law, but then I thought some of that had changed.
The guidelines, you mean
It's under Appendix 2, and it says daily calories.
and if that's under the HPH, I just lost mine.
HHFKA.
The HHFKA,
Tiny.
that is absolutely federal regulation. I mean,
But
anything
I
in
thought
that.
those had been relaxed, not true? Okay. And then my other question is back under Appendix 1, number 7. How are we addressing where it says, consider the religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity of the student body in meal planning? Meals will reflect a wide variety of diverse items.
We did have some discussion over this specific entry at the policy committee. We didn't reach any particular conclusion. Some of the discussion basically covered how much of that is really attainable without drawing the wrong conclusions.
So do we want it in the appendix? I mean, is it?
It's mandated, right?
I don't know if
don't
that
think I'm s-
particular line is mandated. That one I can't answer, that particular question. Margot, do you know?
You know, I will have to double check. I'm having trouble accessing from my iPad, so I'm also going off memory. So that's something Randy and I can
You
follow
perked
on.
up.
No, I know the line that you're
No,
talking about.
actually,
So
this
it's
is
that's a
operator.
question that we can take back to find out if it's mandated language, or if it was part of the discussion. Also, just ask the question: is this more of a food and nutrition appropriate language, or does it belong in a global awareness
Yeah, 'cause
area
I
for the
get the
district?
concept behind this is to expose our kids
Yeah.
to different types of food and grow their palates, but I'm wondering if it's appropriate in this context.
It may not be appropriate in this policy.
But it's not just to grow kids' palates, it's also to respect the food choices of children who come from different cultures, that when they come to the food lunch line, there'll be something there that they feel like eating.
Or may have dietary restrictions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we cover dietary restrictions above it in number 6.
But we can specifically bring this one back to policy. We can specifically discuss this line
Or no,
before it
number
comes
5,
back.
what number is?
It's,
We do dietary in number,
6B.
thanks.
If I meant dietary, like keeping kosher or, not being able to eat pork or.
Or having
I
meat
assume that's
and
what-
dairy together.
Well, that's what he's.
There, two different types of language. There is language in the policy that addresses making sure that foods are provided that respect the different dietary either requirements of that an individual may have for health reasons or for religious reasons. And then there's the other language that I understand you to be referencing, Sarah, addresses
7
intentionally
doesn't
exposing
feel like
students.
Like the one that David just referenced.
Two different categories
Yeah.
of language.
Maybe it's the A part.
Additional?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Someone else have a question? My question is, if we have multiple student wellness policies, is this the best title? Because the title to me tells me this is everything that we have for student wellness, so it's just a question for the committee to think
But it's
about.
hyphen food nutrition.
Yeah.
We talked about
We
that.
talked about it.
Hyphened at the top.
That's why food and nutrition and physical activity was added to the language, because of what you're addressing. But what I hear you saying is that maybe wellness doesn't belong here at all. That word, would you
Well-
consider striking that word?
That's, whatever the committee comes up with, or at least to say student wellness topics are also covered in these policies as a reference or an asterisk or something.
Okay.
I don't have a strong preference, if you're looking for student wellness info and you don't have a second place that's obvious,
Right.
just have it available. So that was additional discussion. Thank you all. Excellent work. Policy. Information, announcements.
Just a reminder again to the board that we are going to cancel the March 3rd work session. We will not be holding March 3rd work session. The April meeting that we are now moving, the regular April meeting will be April 24th, which is Thursday. Make sure we publicize that. Also, the State of the Community address, it's a joint address between the city and the school district, will be held on February 26th. Also, again, will be televised live March 3rd, and then rebroadcast on our cable network. And again, it's a combination of the state of the city and the school district for the community. That would conclude my informational announcements.
Additional announcements?
There's a PCN forum coming up on the 10th of March that I think is a really great topic for families and our children. And it's actually the first time PCN is inviting parents, if they choose, kids slightly older, so maybe 3rd, 4th, and up. And the topic is around learning from our mistakes, moving outside your comfort zone. I just thought I'd share that because it's a first for PCN to encourage parents to bring their kids.
You, Sarah, any other additional items? And a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any objection to adjourning this at this time? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.